Hey guys, I'm back with part 2 of this series. In part 1, I showed you what, in my opinion, is the most important part of creating an environment painting. And in this part, I'm going to use that foundation we built, and I'll show you how to really efficiently create some value sketches. And just like in the first video, I'll show the first sketch in real time, so you guys can kind of see how kind of slow and methodical, but also really efficient the process can be. So thank you guys as always for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like my videos, and yeah, I hope you like this one. Let's go. Now the first part, each of these sketches to create my setup with light and dark shapes took me less than a few minutes, like maybe 2 minutes each. And you'll see from this process that this next part, it took me less than 15 minutes, probably around 15 minutes per sketch here. So that's 20 minutes a piece. And if you work on these in the morning, say to generate your ideas for the day, you can work for 2 hours and have 6 sketches at a really nice kind of resolved level. And the reason that that first step of light and dark shapes is so important is just because it makes it so much easier to refine the sketches, because you have such a solid foundation to build on. For my layers, you'll see all I did here is I took the really rough thumbnail and I flattened it all to one layer, just all the black and the white to one layer. And then I just go with the lasso and I cut the shapes out and create separate layers for the foreground, the midground, and the background. And I just do that to make the actual value sketching part much easier. And I rarely go more than 3 layers for this, and even if there's different details that you might think would be on a different layer, say in the midground, I like to have just 3 layers that are just flat. So if I'm going to paint details on the midground, I'm keeping that all on one layer together. And if I'm going to try something and I'm not sure if I like it, I'll create a layer just to try it. And as soon as I like where it's going, I'll just commit to it and flatten it to the midground layer. So I'm constantly, with these value sketches, working on a very, very simple layer setup, 3 or 4 layers maximum. And then I keep a flattened version of that really rough black and white shape setup above the sketch, and I just turn it off. And I'll constantly be turning that on to make sure and just check that my value sketch is maintaining the strong foundation that I had. You want to constantly be able to refer to that original sketch. Otherwise it's pointless to have done it if you just lose it and you can't go back and check if you're maintaining the plan. When you're oil painting or plein air painting, this can be called a Notan sketch, which is just the 2 value sketch. And what I'll do when I'm plein air painting, since I usually paint in a watercolor sketchbook, is on the back of the page before, I use a brush pen with ink, and I'll do my black and white sketch of just light and dark shapes on the back of the page before. And then that's how I'm constantly referring to that as I do my plein air painting. And even though I'm looking at my subject, I'm painting from life, I still want to stick to that plan that I established for where my dark and light shapes are going to go. So you can see now I'm starting to bring in some more midtones, and I'm keeping the overall structure always, and I'm keeping that in mind. And you can deviate and change the plan that you had if you realize that, like for some of my sketches that I made here, I realized as I was doing the next step that they weren't that strong, and they could have been much stronger, and I kind of dropped the ball on a couple of them. So yeah, I make little tweaks to the setup, but it's all still based on that first attempt that I made, And even if I do make tweaks, I'm still going to stick to that new direction I decided to go. I want to remove as much just kind of guessing and flip-flopping and trying stuff out and failing and trying again. I want to have, my goal is to have a really solid plan to take a lot of the guesswork out, and that's also going to increase your confidence going forward, and it'll make the image come out nicer most times because you're more confident while making it, and that can actually make a huge difference to how the image looks. So even when I'm adding some dark values here and I'm using the airbrush to create atmosphere, I'm still keeping that to whichever layer is appropriate. In the case with the atmosphere, that's on the front layer still, and I'll just clip it to that layer. And I just like working on that setup. It creates, in some cases, I know it can be a hassle to kind of paint around stuff or paint out a mistake that you made, but overall I just like that workflow a lot more. It feels way more kind of efficient and less stressful to me. So when I'm painting these midtones and different values in, if I'm gonna create a darker value, it's going to be grouped in the dark shapes, obviously, and I can add little details, but think about the value group as a whole and use the Notan sketch that you made to just dictate where those are gonna reside. Obviously, you can go into more minute detail, and the edges of the dark shapes and the transition areas can have more fine detail in the later stages, as long as it maintains that overall really nice read that you had going. And constantly just turn the visibility on your original sketch to just refer back to make sure that you have that strong read through the whole process. Even when you get into colors and really small details and stuff, if you're really going the distance with the image and doing a lot of rendering and stuff, even at the very end, still refer to that plan just to make sure that at a very simple level, the image is working even with all its rendering and details. So you can see kind of how I'm not necessarily painting fast and, operating all the tools really quickly. It's more of a relaxed, kind of efficient way of sketching, where that first step, I've mentioned this so many times already this video, but I feel like a broken record, but it's so important to have that foundation. It makes everything so much easier and more relaxing. And sometimes when I'm stressed out, I feel like I'm trying to kind of frantically solve problems, and the longer stuff is taking, the more mistakes I'm making, the faster I tend to work, and it just kind of compounds the issue. You're not really solving anything. You're kind of just taking shots in the dark, hoping you have a happy accident. But this more structured way of working with a solid established plan and just sticking to that just removes so much stress, and it makes things much more efficient and also just more enjoyable to do, more relaxing and not as chaotic. And like I said earlier, these sketches took me less than 15 minutes, and some might be a little more than 15 minutes, but some are less. And it just overall taking 20 minutes to do a sketch like this, if you're trying to be a professional, it's like, this is more than fast enough to be productive and generate ideas. And even if you had to show a client or your art director these kind of level of sketches in the morning, that's some really good productivity, and you didn't kind of burn yourself out in the process by, not knowing what you're going to do and just trying to make stuff on the fly. I think there can be a lot of intimidating info out there for people who are trying to get better and trying to become a professional. If you're a student, some of the advice you get that is to work yourself into the ground every day, day in, day out, 14 hours a day. There's a time and a place for that kind of grind, but realistically, for me, and I think more people need to just face this and admit it, but for me, like, I have maybe 3 hours a day where I'm really productive and I'm firing on all cylinders, and it feels like I have good ideas, I'm energized. But doing concept art, especially anything in a creative field, it takes a lot of mental energy, and you can kind of lose that boost that you had at the beginning of the day. After doing this for a couple hours, you just naturally become less productive. So it's about using that productivity in the right place. And for me, the best possible thing is to set up and do the hard part first while I'm feeling energized and while my mind is working at its full capacity, and generate those quick plan sketches so that I'm set up and I don't have to rely as much on motivation later. I can just take the ideas I have, and then it's more just relying on my fundamentals and my technical skills, and the hard part of actually coming up with the ideas and the plan is done. So there it is. That's a little more than 10 minutes to finish that sketch, and I want to get them all to that level, kind of. And once they're all at that level, we can go to another round where I'll pick maybe 2 or 3 that I like, and I'll push those really far. And what I might do in the next video even is push it really far just in black and white or in grayscale, and maybe I can show you guys how I could use those details and all that work on a really advanced sketch in grayscale and just do a really quick kind of colorization of that. Because there's a couple ways of working when you're going to add color to grayscale. One of them is to kind of get your sketch roughly laying in and then just start painting in colors and build it up that way off of a really rough base. But there's also ways to do most of the work in grayscale, even all your brush strokes and your fine details, and then use the Photoshop tools at your disposal to colorize and give the impression that it was painted in color. And it can be tricky and it takes some practice to get used to using those tools and having it look natural, but maybe I'll show you guys how you can do that in the next video. The goal for this image was, it's for another personal project I'm working on. So I had a very specific kind of idea in my mind about how I want it to look. You'll see in the next part when I really advance the sketch, I want to finesse it a little bit in terms of the actual aesthetic and how the brushstrokes look and just the kind of illustrative quality. I have a very specific need for that, but to the level I get them here is more than enough for, you know, the first stage of creating a concept where really the paramount thing is the idea and not necessarily the kind of quality of the illustration. But so the goal for this image was to show, my kind of brief I gave myself was to show this giant mountain and this bleak kind of barren landscape, and that's kind of all I had in mind. I was open to exploring, you know, different altitudes, different times of day, and different kind of weather scenarios. I just very broadly had this idea for a giant mountain. I want the scale to be really massive and, you know, really awesome and epic. So that was just the very broad goal, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to make a video of the process, because it's pretty much a comfort zone for me, as it is for a lot of environment guys. This kind of just mountainous, rocky landscapes that, you know, you can get away with. You can do a lot of work just with the mood and the atmosphere and the lighting. And the design, it's not as design heavy, so it's much less stressful to paint these kind of organic rocky shapes. I'm always trying to really feel what it's like to be in the environments that I'm creating. It's hard to describe, but sometimes when I'm outside in nature, or, you know, even if I'm like taking out the garbage in the middle of the night in the winter and it's, you know, freezing cold, and I just get a feel, and there's a vibe in the atmosphere kind of, and I wish that I could capture that exact feeling of standing in it when I'm creating my images, and I'm trying to get as close to that kind of feel as possible when I'm creating environments. And when you're sitting in your office, obviously you can't feel every scenario. You can't feel physically what it's like to be in any given environment, but you have to try and imagine yourself there. And like, how cold is it? Is it high altitude? Is it hard to breathe? Is it windy and rainy? And are you like damp and frozen, or is it really humid and hot? So I like to think about that stuff and try my best to deeply feel like I'm there, even though it's impossible. Just try at least. And I think at least if you're thinking about that kind of stuff, it can help a lot. If you guys are watching and you are trying this kind of stuff and it's taking you much longer to achieve the result that you want, longer than it took me, then I just want to reassure you that it's totally okay to ramp up to your own efficient way of doing things. And the way I'm doing it might not be the best way for you, but at least the more you try this kind of stuff, the more you'll learn little things that make sense to you and things that don't feel good to you. And if something doesn't feel right to you, it's okay to, try something else. And especially if you're not enjoying the process, there's an important distinction from having to practice and just get better at something, but it might just straight up not be the right workflow for you. For example, I'm a person that needs to see my kind of end goal very quickly. I need to see things materialize quickly. Whereas I know a lot of great artists who work in a much more step-by-step and methodical process where it takes a long time for the image to materialize in front of them, and it's very precise and detailed. And I know some artists that work that way and create amazing artwork that I wish I could make. But that process for me, I've tried it and it just doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't feel good to work that way. My goal is to work loosely and in an efficient way where I can see my image materialize quickly and get excited and start building off that. And I always want it to feel loose and spontaneous and kind of stress-free all the way until the very last brushstroke where I can call the image finished. For me, having that kind of mindset it makes me want to return to the process if I have fun, and if it's low stress, it will keep me coming back to try again and again. If I'm really caught up in tiny details and stressed out about a million layers and that every piece feels like it takes 20 hours to actually start looking like something, that process isn't enticing enough for me to want to come back and keep doing it. So it's all about finding that process that feels fun and engaging for you, and like you could do it every day. So if you're just starting out and you're learning, don't feel like you need to work insanely fast and scribble really crazy loose lines all the time. You can take your time and be methodical. And one thing I need to always remind myself is to know what mark I want to make before I make it. It's easy to just let your hand go and just start painting and drawing and scribbling stuff without really knowing. Really experienced artists and the guys that are insanely talented and skilled can pull off this kind of scribbly and sketchy, all over the place kind of method. But for me, I still feel like I need to know what I want to do in my mind before I actually do it, and that just seems to create more consistent results for me. Sometimes I'll scribble and get kind of caught up in just not really thinking and letting my hand just do whatever it wants and my first kind of instincts on the page. And sometimes I get happy accidents and it does end up cool. It's not like a reliable way to create quality designs and illustrations. consistently. It's just not reliable enough. So I encourage you to just take your time, especially if you're a student or you're just learning. And even if you are a professional, just know what you want to make before you make the mark. And it just will create more consistency, and it's going to save you time in the long run too, because you're not fixing just stupid mistakes that you didn't really think about. You're more deliberate, which means you're going to make less mistakes. So there it is, guys. That is the second part of this. I'll come out with part 3 probably pretty soon. I'm hoping to do it in March because I haven't actually finished the sketch yet. But yeah, these took me probably 2 hours total, and it's a really fun process, and it's quite efficient, and it's something that you can use in all sorts of different subjects. You can even think about characters this way, and props in terms of composition and just planning things out. So yeah. So I hope you guys like this one. Thank you so much for watching. As always, like I said, I'll try and get part 3 going as soon as I can. And yeah, thank you guys for subscribing. Please keep leaving me feedback. It helps me a lot. And just remember not to get discouraged about this stuff, and keep a positive attitude, and just keep at it, and things will improve, and you'll get more efficient and more comfortable. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.